Okay, so let's look at some of the impact of all of the social changes that teens are going through. One of them, when you look at the changes that are biological, that are social, is depression. There's definitely some genetic disposition for this, meaning you find it more so in families. Also, can be environmental incidents like deaths or a depressed parent, social situations with friends, that sort of thing. They do find it's more common in girls than it is in boys. A lot of it has to do, I believe, with the stress on the female gender role or their reactions to stress. Boys and girls just react to stress differently, and hormonal issues possibly could be involved. What goes right along with that sometimes is the rate of adolescent suicide. The rates of suicide are really kind of scary. The rates have tripled over the last 30 years. One in every 90 minutes is crazy. So, definitely a lot of incidents of suicide. They do find it's more common in boys in terms of actual completions, more common in girls for actual attempts. I think largely because of the lethal methods that are being used. When you look at adolescent suicide, there are some common factors that often go into it: depression, family conflicts, the history of abuse or neglect, a lot of things that are just negative environmental situations, drug alcohol abuse. So there's a lot of coexisting factors with that. There are a lot of warning signs, but sometimes there are none. Sometimes people talk about it directly or indirectly. You might notice changes in their behavior when it comes to school, or their eating habits, general depression. So really just kind of watching out. And the hard part is a lot of these things are just moody teenage behavior as well. But I feel like everyone notices the signs after it's too late. That's often what I hear. There's definitely some changes with family relationships. As adolescents become much more like adults, they start to, and this also goes along with that cognitive piece that we talked about last week, the whole questioning and being hypercritical of other people. They often question their parents, they rebel against their wishes, they want to have that rebellion or adrenaline shift for doing something that they shouldn't. There's definitely a quest for autonomy, much like what you saw in the toddler area of development. But now, because of the fact they're near adult in many situations, it's probably a little bit stronger. So conflict is often something that happens. The conflict, generally speaking, is more like not based on big crises, but basic day-to-day type of stuff. It has a lot to do with their argumentativeness, their assertiveness, that sort of thing. We do find that trust can help with this conflict. The more that the parents trust the adolescents, the less that they are aggressive or argumentative back. But it takes two to create that trust. And you also see a lot of pressure or emphasis on the relationships that they have with peers. Belonging and fitting in is very important. This time of the life, it's more critical than any other. This gives them the opportunity for social interaction, to compare themselves, and often a lot of people start to have the negative thoughts of peer pressure, but generally speaking, kids tend to pick people that are like them. And so if you have a kid that's a good kid, generally speaking, they're picking a peer group that is very similar to them. The cliques and crowd situation is huge in high school. And it's funny because cliques are more self-directed or self-initiated. There are small groups of exclusive friends that have a lot of interaction, whereas the crowds tend to be more socially driven, where people put you into these. There's characteristics that are shared. They don't necessarily interact with each other, but socially people get stereotyped into this group because of some characteristic. There's not a lot of, choice there. So here are some examples of the stereotypical crowds. I don't know what they call them now, but the text called them that. And they have, because of these labels, they have expectation that these people behave in certain ways. And last one I want to talk about in this area is the pressure to conform. I mentioned it already. The peer pressure can be negative, and it's largely for those kids that are trying to figure out what they are and who they are. They often get into a group that is an exploration group that's not necessarily like them. But once they start to be confident in what their own ideas are, they find that group, and they often choose, like I said, people that are much like them. Those are your social changes in adolescence.